Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Assalamu alaikum to everyone who is watching at the moment. We are live from Pakistan Welfare Organization, Australia. And this is your host, Vanya Osmani, back here again with a second episode of our mental health, COVID, and human rights campaign. So this is our second episode. अगर आपने हमारा first episode अभी नहीं देखा, then you can always scroll down to Facebook and you can find our video. Moreover, I would like to thank everyone who gave such a good response to our last video. It was so great. It was so great to see so many views and so many good questions. क्योंकि ये live है, if you have any questions regarding any of this, you can always let us know and we will try to come up with an answer, वरना we will shift to another session. Yeah. So शुरू करते हैं. As I said, मेरा नाम माना उस्मानी है. I am here with a mental health campaign which we are collaborating with Citizens Commissions on Human Rights Victoria. So a huge shout out, thank you to them as well. The reason why we are bringing you this session is because COVID has impacted so many of our lives, financially, emotionally, mentally. So we want to address those problems and we want to give you a solution to those problems as well. आज का हमारा टॉपिक जो है, it's gonna be very interesting. It's gonna be about mental health diagnosis or moreover human rights violation in terms to mental health. ये टॉपिक बहुत कवर नहीं किया जाता है एंड आई गेस कम ही लोग होते हैं जो इसको कंसिडर करते हैं. So for that purpose, we have a guest of ours who is from Citizens Commissions on Human Rights Victoria here with us as well. He is a fundamental part of this organization and he is working as a public relations officer there as well. His name is Lee Riley. He was with us last week also. He contributed to all of our concepts towards human rights in psychiatric treatments and everything on alternatives. So we would like to welcome him back again. This is Lee Riley. Yeah, let's get him on board. Hello, Lee. How are you?
Hi, Wani. I'm good. Thank you. Very good.
Welcome back again.
Thank you. How are you? Good?
I'm good, thanks. So a little bit, Lee. Lee is a public relations officer. Also, he has worked with Kim Cullen. He was executive director of Citizens Commissions on Human Rights Victoria, and they have worked together for a very long time. Moreover, he has been working with Kim to bring resilience, to help educate the public regarding the alternatives and on the potential human rights abuse in the mental health system. Also, Lee has a background in nursing as well and has experience in the system firsthand. So that's Lee for you. So Lee, I told a little bit about you, but I want you to tell our viewers about yourself and how your position as public relation officer works, in terms of this and why you work with CCHR.
Sure. Thank you, Wania. I'll answer the question as best I can for your viewers. So essentially, the first job or the first profession I did when I left school was to do nursing. So I did some years of nursing, continued in various areas, very general nursing. So I sort of viewed the area of nursing as I guess it's a way to look after people simply. Yeah. And part of nursing, and not everyone is exposed to this, but part of that was there's this part of this psychiatric nursing. Now, I was never a psychiatric nurse. However, the large hospital that I worked in at the time, they had what they call pool nurses. So the pool nurses sort of go into a pool and they get sent to certain areas of the hospital. Now, I didn't mention this last week, but I was exposed to a psychiatric facility in a large hospital. I found the experience strange. I guess I didn't really know what I was looking at the time. I was quite young. People are under lock and key. That's something I always found very strange. I mean, the psychiatric facilities where people are under lock and key, whether it's, anyway, that's just the way it is. So later, a few years later, then I was would be, then what I did was I did agency nursing, which is a little bit different because you're just out on your own. The agency calls you, you go to different places. And I was sent, and for the viewers that were here last week, they recall the story that I was sent to a psychiatric facility. And pretty much long story short, I didn't like what I saw, and I didn't feel that. I saw one young girl who had just come out of electroconvulsive therapy. For what, if anyone doesn't understand what that is, essentially it boils down to putting voltages through someone's head. So voltages of electricity through someone's head. Now, I'm sure that's as painful as it sounds. And this young girl, to me, was quite damaged by this and whatever other destructive treatments she was receiving at the facility. Clearly, at that point, and I'm not alone in this area, but I guess if anyone with any hearts or something like that, I would pretty much assume that they wouldn't be impressed with it at the very least. And clearly, I was being a nurse and wanting to care for people. I was horrified, to be really honest with you. I was actually horrified. So then that led me on a journey to find people who also disagreed with that kind of treatment. So anything that was destructive, that was introduced to people, any destructive treatments that were introduced to people by the field of psychiatry in general. Clearly, at some point, that led me to the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, where eventually I met Kim. This is a number of years ago. So the people at the Citizen Commission on Human Rights, they have the same goals: to educate people about the destructive practices of psychiatry, and that continues to this day all around the world. We have chapters everywhere. I guess, really, to answer your question in a very, very short way, I care about people. I don't want them hurt, no matter how they get, no matter what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Lee, if it's a person who has if a person has a mental, any condition or any mental disturbances or distress, and goes to a doctor, what happens to them? You were a nurse, so you would know about this. And so what is the process for someone being diagnosed for a mental disorder?
Okay, so let's start. So as an ex-nurse, I'm currently not, I don't have a current registration of any kind, so I can't talk about diagnosing. It's not my field. I literally can't talk about that. I don't have an opinion on it. But if you were to talk about, I guess, the process these days, you find that unwittingly, a lot of doctors, general practitioners, are the ones that are unwittingly putting people onto psychiatric drugs. So that is actually happening these days. Now, just to give you a couple of quotes, and this is actually from the psychiatric position, and I'll literally read these as they're written, just so you can get an idea of psychiatry and what it thinks of its own field that it then diagnoses people with. So this is from Alan Francis, and so he's a psychiatrist and a former DSM-4. Now, DSM is the Diagnostical Statistical Manual number 4. Now, the Diagnostical Statistical Manual is actually a book full of diagnoses which are literally voted into existence. That sounds incredible and something people wouldn't believe. And it's probably the most open secret going in psychiatry. So that Alan Francis, who's the psychiatrist and former DSM-4, he's the task force chairman. So those people, what they do is they sit at the top of the ladder and they assess books and decide with a body of people what will go into the book and what won't. He says, and I quote, and this is all verifiable, there are no objective tests in psychiatry. So I'll let that one sink in just for a second. No X-ray, laboratory, or exam finding that says definitively that someone does or does not have a mental disorder. And he goes on to say, it's bull. and I think most of your viewers, especially if they're, they know what bull means. I mean, you just can't define it. So that's actually what he says. And I'll get to your point in a moment, but I just want to tell you what psychiatrists say about their own field, which is very, very telling and very important. So the next quote is from Bernard Bourne, the professor and head of psychiatry at the University of Adelaide. So Adelaide, clearly in Australia.
Yeah.
So he says, quote, "Unlike physical illness, we can't rely on blood tests." So as he says, unlike physical illness, so physical illness, flus, colds, a myriad of diseases that doctors will diagnose. He says we can't rely on blood tests, brain scans, or other biological tests. So long story short, there are no tests to back up any diagnosis, regardless of what the psychiatric diagnosis is. It says, as a consequence of this lack of diagnostic accuracy, our field relies purely on observation. So it is it's subjective. So it depends on the person making the assessment.
So in short, you're saying that diagnosing a psychiatric condition is not an easy game. It's not for everybody.
Well, what I'm actually saying, even more bluntly than that, Wania, is that, and another quote will indicate this even firmer, the Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatrists scans to determine if you have ADHD. Now, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, that's actually this kind of disorder that was labelled across a lot of children. So basically, there is no test. Now, if you consider, if you have a child and the child breaks his arm, or there's a suspected break.
Yeah.
The break in an arm. Now, a layperson generally knows that the use of will bring forward a break or some damage to the body. And there's a very clear line of treatment with breaks, very established lines of treatment. So the person knows that this is going to happen. So there's always some idea of what's going to happen when the child goes in there. So eventually the break is assessed. The type of break is assessed because there's more than one type of break. And then what happens is there's a cast applied. So there's a whole process to this, and it's quite well known by doctors. With psychiatry, it's a sham because there's no test to back up any supposed diagnosis. Yeah, that's an issue. You'll excuse me because I'm actually I don't. This is very unusual because I'm reading off the screen too. So.
Yeah, no worries. So, if there aren't any tests for mental health illnesses, and then how it is actually diagnosed, and we have been led to believe that there is a chemical imbalance. Most of the health professionals say that we have chemical imbalance in order to have mental illness. So, is that the only cause, or how does that actually work?
Okay, so at this juncture, I would say that. So firstly, I want to make a very important note here because we're talking about the potential of people at the moment. Any of your viewers or friends currently being on psychiatric drugs. So I would say very, very important note right now, and I can't stress this enough. No one should stop taking any psychiatric drug without the assistance of a competent medical doctor. The information. So basically, what that means, what it says. We don't give medical advice, but a competent medical advice should always be sought in this area if a person no longer wishes to be on psychiatric drugs. So, just to reiterate, there are no medical or scientific tests that can prove mental disorders are medical conditions. So, what we're trying to say is that the medical condition, the underlying medical condition, which might be precipitating the so-called disorder, should be checked out by a competent medical practitioner. Now, in simple terms, what that means is that if someone is having pressures, some of the pressures themselves, as we discussed last week, I mean, if you don't have a job and you don't have money, well, that's simple. You have to get a job. Now, that's hard, because to say to someone, get a job, well, that's not easy. And that's what I always say about your community. Your community, that's what you do. You help, as we spoke, I think we spoke earlier today anyway, but the communities are very, very important. Leaning on friends is very, very important. Assistance, help, compassion, they're all rolled up into the same thing. And that's both a cultural thing, and it's just being an Australian as well. Every Australian wants to help every other Australian. So that's fairly normal. But what I'm saying is that if a person feels a particular way, one should go to see a competent medical practitioner who can test. There are myriad tests. There are blood tests, there are blood gases, there are allergy tests, all sorts of allergy tests, and many, many more. So I'm not at liberty to really give advice on any medical conditions here. But if one seeks out a competent medical practitioner and gets a myriad to keep testing and get to the bottom of what it might be. There are food intolerances, many, many kinds of things. So I would suggest that people first rule out an underlying physical condition.
Exactly.
Because that's what your doctors are for.
Yeah. And I think that individual also needs to assess their surrounding, like what were they feeling before that particular situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very, very important, very important. In a stressful environment, and it's called a stressful environment for that reason.
In this COVID, we have heard so many of people saying that I have been, like I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm feeling suicidal, and I might have this mental health condition. But what if that mental health condition is not actually a condition, it's an emotional reaction to COVID? And people need to assess their surrounding. Were we feeling the same way before COVID happened? Yeah, I think it's a big factor in this.
Absolutely. People experience depression, anxiety. It doesn't make them diseased, though. I mean, of course, people feel emotions, but it doesn't indicate that they have a disease.
And they don't need to be on psychiatric drugs for feeling this way.
They definitely don't need to be on psychiatric. Unfortunately, COVID can be used as a front, and it can create, or not COVID itself, but the lockdowns, people being reined in, free movement, clearly we need to obviously balance that with cleanliness, hygiene, the things like masks. Of course, it's a standard government line, and it assists. I mean, clearly we've seen rates drop, but I guess we're not here to talk about COVID. But the responses to something are definitely not a disease. The response to something is an emotional response. And it shouldn't be treated as a disease and therefore drugged unwittingly by in the majority general practitioners. So your doctors.
Yeah.
So go on. Sorry.
No, sorry. You said.
Oh, no. I was just going to say that, you have a pretended, or with psychiatry, you have a pretended authority. So that comes across as an authority. So people, and an area where there's a lot of misunderstandings, you can often find an authority in that area. So the thing is, and according to one study, 56% of the psychiatrists deciding on what disorders to list in the DSM-4 also had personal ties to pharmaceutical companies. So that's something as well. So if you have, we all know about conflicts of interest. People understand conflicts of interest, and conflicts of interest don't just, they can be prevalent in psychiatry, but they can be prevalent in lots of other places, and it's a very common idea for people.
Yeah. So we have manual saying the drug makes it just worse.
Well, essentially the manual itself, and people can go and find diagnostic or statistical manual and look at it and laugh at some of the diagnoses that are in there, because some of them are quite farcical. Actually, just at this juncture, I would say also that we produced a documentary, a free documentary. It's on a DVD. It could also be viewed online if you were to go to cchr.org.au or cchr.org, which is actually the international body based in Los Angeles. And we produced a DVD called The Diagnostical Statistical Manual, Psychiatry's Deadliest Scam. Now, they're strong words, but they're true. And you can view that online. So any of your viewers can view that, cchr.org, or if you were to get in contact with us or through you, Wania, we can actually send people a copy of the DVD.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Because that's a part of the education.
Yeah.
Yeah, people can request a free copy, and we're quite happy to send them a copy of that.
Yeah. So Lee, rather than being on psychiatric drugs straight away and getting in admission in psychiatric institution, if somebody's feeling depressed, if they're feeling suicidal, if they're anxious towards anything, or if they're just having like they're going through an emotional distress, what they should do? Like, what are the alternatives for that?
Okay, so some of the alternatives. Well, some of the alternatives are old as time itself. So one of them is talking to a friend. So a problem. Some say a problem shared is a problem halved. Sometimes you'll find that if you talk to somebody, and I'm not giving any medical advice, but this is fairly common sense advice that most people would agree with. You talk to a friend, someone who you're close to, a family member, and there's no problem talking to someone about a problem. You'll find that if you talk about a problem with someone, you'll find that often that other person might have had the same problem themselves. So that's one. If you are of a religious persuasion, whether it be Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, any of the myriad religions on the face of this good earth, also talking to someone, one of your religious counsellors. Yeah. Religious counselling is fantastic, especially where it's culturally sensitive, because you always find that there's a reality there. There's a reality from the person. So that reality is very, very important. Having that reality. The other one, like I said, very simple things like taking a walk. Take a walk. It sounds too simple. It's 3 words. Take a walk. Very difficult in lockdown, but at the moment the lockdowns are being lifted. Yeah, I would say, thankfully, absolutely. And I would say, take a walk till you feel refreshed. Get your attention out. Much like Kim said last week, look at the trees, look at the buildings, smell the air. Enjoy a good walk. You don't have to do a Forrest Gump walk. You don't have to walk across the country, if people know that movie. But definitely a good walk, and any form of exercise too, that actually gets your attention out. Being locked down is not fun.
I just want to add, I think the best part of Australia is if you're a student, if you're going through some tough life or study and work schedule, majority of Australian university schools have counselors to talk to, and I think it's the best way to to be heard and to get out of your chest. I think that's the best thing, and I think it's one of the great alternatives as well. Yeah,
sure. I mean, of course, I'm not a registered counsellor, so I can't comment on things like that, but I do know that if the counsellor has any affiliation with psychiatry, then I would doubt the effectiveness and if they're prescribing drugs, then or they're even indicating that drugs should be used, then that they're actually not even allowed to do that anyway. But so counsellors can't do that, not allowed to do that. But school counsellors themselves are interesting because they can direct the student to an area within the university where they can get help. And I know that there are areas within the university that deal with the financial situation, they deal with housing, they deal with food. One of the great
jobs as well. They deal with jobs as well. Like if you're really worried about
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, one of the great things I saw in Sydney a little while back, because Sydney went through its own style of lockdown, not as severe as Victoria and Melbourne, but my wife is from Thailand, so my wife's Thai, and so we know the Thai community here in Sydney quite well. And the Thai restaurants banded together to cook food for the Thai students that were living here. So what they did by doing that, they alleviated some of the pressure from the students. Now, people obviously moved into someone's house who could afford the rent. So there was a lot of movement around. So that's what I say about your organisation. You have to rely. Don't be scared to rely on your community. If you have no money, don't worry about it. A lot of people don't have money. Go to a friend, knock on their door. Just get the help you need at the time, and don't ever be ashamed to go and get help. There's nothing wrong with getting normal help. But on the subject of psychiatry, clearly, if you feel a bit upset or something, first establish whether how you're feeling is based on a physical condition, and that requires a competent medical practitioner. Beyond that, then you break it down into, so what's happening in my life? Am I hungry? Do I have somewhere to live? Have I got enough money for my phone so I can phone my parents overseas, if that's the case for international students? So there are very common sense approaches to this that can often be overlooked in times of panic.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. So it's a great advice, to be very honest, Lee. Rather than psychiatric drugs and seeking psychiatric treatment, it's better to follow the alternatives, like you said. And also, is there anything else that you want to add, since we are ending this off now? Is there anything that you would recommend to people? Anything that you want to tell them that you should do this?
Sure. So I would. There's a few things. So I would suggest that people keep tuning in every week. Tell your friends, because we're it's been used a lot lately, but we're all in this together. Okay. I mean, I know that's been used a few times now, but that goes a lot further, because it's about planet Earth as well. I mean, we're all in this together. Like, we're on this big spinning rock, so we literally are all in this together. So we should rely on each other, lean on each other when we need help. Also, I would say that if you, anyone listening or someone has been abused at the hands of psychiatry, or who has had an adverse drug reaction to psychiatric drugs. So if someone's been placed onto psychiatric drugs, they don't like it, they're having bad reactions, they can contact Citizens Commission on Human Rights in Victoria. Now, if everyone has a pen there, I'll give them a moment to get a pen. So it's 1-300 085.
We can just write it down in the chat box. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so we can actually put the information for you up there, and then you could call. That's in Victoria, but if anyone's listening from any other parts of the world, then clearly the Citizen Commission on Human Rights in their area, or online. So the resources are there. We have the information. It's been researched. If you want to know something about psychiatry, come and see us.
Yeah, right.
And send your questions in. Please send your questions in. So because what we're here to do is to actually give people answers to their questions. I mean, we have our own resources, of course, but sometimes people have different questions. Sometimes they're very specific. Sometimes they're quite general. And we do have the answers. So please ask.
So Lee, is it only that your organization is only confined to psychiatric treatments?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's what we do. So we investigate and educate in the field of psychiatry, the damaging treatments of psychiatry. So yes, we're definitely the watchdog committee, what you would call a watchdog committee on psychiatry. Mm-hmm. So we keep an eye on them.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. So thank you so much, Lee, for your time. Thank you so much for such a wonderful advice. Obviously, community is here for you to rely on, as you said, and I'm quoting you. Community are supposed to, like supposed to be a helping hand, supposed to be a shoulder to cry on and guide you
Absolutely.
every way. And if any of my Pakistani community is feeling that way, is feeling overwhelmed throughout this whole entire COVID situation, and wants some help, and wants someone to, to share their feelings with, or somebody who can, like get their feelings out of their chest, we're always here for you. You can always let us know, and we'll try to help you out. We will try to get through you as much as we can. So thank you so much, Lee, for being here today. And Lee will be joining us for, in future as well, regarding this campaign. And Yeah, that's it from our side. Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you so much for your time.
You're quite welcome, and it's always a pleasure being on here. Thank you to your listeners as well.
Thank you so much. Also, just remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you are going through an emotional trauma, if you're, if you don't feel like yourself, as he said, go out, take a walk, talk to someone, and talk to anyone you're comfortable with, and then assess your surroundings. Like, what do I have? Am I having an emotional reaction, or is this something very serious? So this is what you need to do. This is what this campaign is all about. It's educating you regarding your mental health and emotional well-being. So take care. Allah Hafiz, khayal rakhega, and see you soon.
Thank you. Take care.